empty box.
Would you like another?
Extra big-ass fries!
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please
What?
come back when you can afford to make a purchase. I'm sorry you're having
Come
trouble.
on. My kids are starving.
Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we believe in freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, but above all, we believe in freedom of existence through self-reliance. This station is 100% listener-supported, and as a fundraising promotion, I have a kick-ass free gift for a $100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So if food prices go crazy, the shit hits the fan, or if you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our seed pack special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need, as humans, to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents and the offline home canning how to do everything website all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What we do in life, it goes in eternity.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Revising Reality tonight on, this is Sunday, May 15th, 2016. This is our continuation of the last show, which was about the Twin Towers. Where did the towers go? Why did they disintegrate, perhaps? What is plume-gate? Why is it rarely discussed? What really happened on 9/11, the artificial disaster Fukushima? And both of them, basically, at least the 9/11 was planned as a dark occultist ritual to murder a bunch of people in front of the public eye for particular reasons. So this week, I actually have a very special guest, Steve Gilmore. He's the author of The Beauty of Existence Decoded, and his website is aussiethinker.wordpress.com, and another one, exopolitician.wordpress.com. And he's an all-around fascinating guy with much perspective on what's going on. He's kind of controversial, but I'm very happy about that, and he might contradict some of the stuff that we were talking about last show on Judy Wood and such, but that's also all right. I want to bring forth the truth. I'm not necessarily worried about, if I was wrong or if I was right. There's a whole bunch of stuff to look at and to try to decide and figure out the truth. That's what we want. So, Steve, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, and thank you very much for the intro.
Thank you very much, by the way, for being here. And Crystal, how about you? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited for the show tonight and am looking forward to hearing what you and Steve have to share.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
In the run-up to this show, before I knew that Steve was actually going to be here for this, because it was kind of short notice, and I very much appreciate him being able to come on anyway, I was doing a lot of research into the electric side of earthquakes, because many of them had been predicted now lately, especially by, say, Ben Davidson, and there's another guy that I found that was doing some of that for years. But the guy who was, because Ben Davidson wasn't doing this back in 2011 every day, or at least not putting out YouTube videos that I could find. What I did find was the Bar Caroler, and he didn't have an earthquake watch for during the geomagnetic storm that was happening, like just before, or I should say, right as the earthquake went down in Fukushima. So I was trying to find information like on the OLR anomalies. When there's a lot of magnetic mixing, you tend to have earthquakes in that particular area, and that's how they're being predicted. But they usually don't seem to happen during electromagnetic storms, because when the Earth's shield is at a lot of power and is high up, like you don't really have
Yeah.
the strong coronal hole impact. It's usually after the solar wind starts to die down. So
Right.
I'm not entirely certain. I'm not an expert by any means on this. I was just trying to figure it out to see if there was. The guy that was doing it, he didn't manage to predict that one. His earthquake watch beforehand was for March 5th, 6th, and 7th, and he was talking about the southern area. He did point out that there might have been a place in the coronal hole that would have helped trigger this earthquake on March 11th, 2011, but
Yes.
didn't really go into that. Like he didn't really go into addressing like why it was that he didn't catch it. I mean, I know he's just trying
Yes.
to predict them, but like I was trying to see if it was going to be, it was natural. Like, and I thought the timing of it is extremely strange because it does fall on one of the occult ritual days. You know,
Right.
it does equal 11, which is one of those power numbers. If you take 3/11/2011 equals 9, the power number of 333, or it could be broken down into 3/11/11/11. The prime number of
Yes.
3 creates a strong occult date and opens up the door for manipulation. The time of occurrence was UTC 5:46:23 equals 20, reduces as 5555. 5 is a death number.
Yes.
So there's
Yes.
it's hard to say. And there was some data on HARP like having a spike at that point, but then were they just picking up the sun or were they picking up something else? That was what I was trying to figure out. I did not really come to a conclusion, however, or a solid conclusion, but like I said, it's kind of looks like maybe it shouldn't have happened then, and it certainly wasn't predicted. So I thought that was very interesting. I wanted to put that out there because I spent a couple hours like just searching and searching and
Sure.
figure out what was going on there. In
Sure.
case it might have been, a natural occurrence, but the timing is extremely, extremely strange. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff that went down with the event, especially the Fukushima plume-gate documents for the FO's Freedom of Information Act documents that were brought forth from the NRC and such, and they knew what was going on. They knew how badly this would hurt the entirety of Earth and the United States, and that everybody would end up getting
Yes.
dosed because it hit the jet stream, and it hit the Pacific Ocean, and they did a whole bunch of other stupid things in there, and the Yakuza was involved with trying to clean it up and getting like rundown people to do it. There's so much corruption and strange things that happened on that day. It all needs to be said. So with
I
that
think so.
being put out there, I wanted to. You have some very interesting things to bring forward, and I know you wanted to cover some back history before then. So do you want to start?
Yes. Well, thank you very much for giving me the forum, Tim. I feel honoured. The first thing I'm going to say is we touched on many things offline the other day, and I would like to sort of bring them back, perhaps in a slightly different order to the way they were discussed before. Um, you remember I was a little bit critical of Judy Woods.
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying she's wrong. She might be right with some of her theories, but I'll give you this. I also mentioned a rather shady organization called CERN. And these guys, it's spelled CERN for anybody who wants to Google it. These guys are responsible for discovering the Higgs boson particle.
Yes.
They've got the Hadron Collider, and they all sorts of strange articles about that being a time portal and all sorts of things. Now, I just want to put things in perspective. They've now discovered, apparently, and if you actually read about it, you wonder how, because it's all done through computer simulation. They've now discovered it's called Higgsino. It's a new particle. It's 750 times the mass of a standard photon, whatever that means. So extremely heavy comparatively to everything else. And you know what? They've now amassed 200 theories about this particle, and not one explanation. So this where this is. I mean, I talked about. I try and not oversimplify. I try and simplify things down to the raw elements. And I don't know if it's such a term, but I just feel that you get a guy with or a lady with 200 PhDs, and she's in the business or he's in the business of undersimplifying or complexifying everything, and that's where I fall down with Judy Woods. I feel that she's gone into too much detail. She's now a bit like you look at a wall that's got crags on it, and you can start seeing faces that aren't there, and you know. We can discuss that at a different level, and there might be something in that. You know that might be there might be some reasoning behind that. But I mean, certainly on the manifest plane where we are, is just simply a trick of the light, or the way that you perceive the way the light is shining. So or the light is responding to the cracks in the wall. So I tend to look for much more mundane. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Much more mundane, reasons for the reason why it necessarily happened, or I should say how it happened.
Right. So even with your guys who do the earthquake watch, and I'm sure they do a fantastic job, I think you've got to look at things in a very different way. I still don't think we really understand earthquakes, truly why they happen. And I would like to give an analogy which isn't going to be very comfortable for some listeners, and others will absolutely love it. Think about the planet as a living organism. I know we don't think of it like this. And let's say somebody hurt it very badly, or something hurt it very badly, and what we see are sort of spasms that keep on reoccurring in the weak spots. You know, like you do in the. But have you ever had that? You've played in some kind of sport. Somebody's tackled you in the wrong way, and the bloody injury keep playing up for the next 5 years at odd times. Have you ever experienced that?
Oh yeah, I have my
Right.
knee is kind of annoying.
Right. Well, I've had the same thing. I ran for a train. I slipped over and bam, straight down on my knee. And for some reason, it plays up. You know, it's not a problem. Don't feel anything. And then it's out for about 3 weeks every 4 years, something like that. So, with the earthquake, I know what happened. I mean, I dial in, as I've explained to you. Perhaps I should explain to the audience. I dial into cosmic sources. It's not; these aren't astral. I simply go directly to source, which I would argue is located in subspace somewhere.
Okay.
It's actually behind our reality plane. So if you can think about light, the light plane, as in the astral plane, is above our reality plane. There is something below, which is subspace.
Okay.
And I managed to drill into that, and I can go to source, and that's where I get my feedback from. The problem is it's usually in a very strange format and has to be recodified, so things can go awry, you know, even in my interpretation of information that I pull out. But in terms of the what affected Fukushima, why Fukushima happened, it's absolutely obvious as far as I'm concerned that there was an attack, and it's been well documented in the alternative medias. On the 12th of January 2010, there was an attack on Haiti, which caused an earthquake, which obviously was very, very upsetting for a number of Americans, because some of them had family members over there, etc. So everybody is very much involved with the try and rescue effort and bailing out. And I know the Clintons made a lot of money out of that, or so the rumor goes, which is rather odd, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, look at the Red Cross usually makes a lot of money off of this stuff.
Yes. And they didn't want any support, any food or water. They just wanted your money. That's all they wanted.
Yeah, that's not even strangely suspicious at all.
So the alternative medias talk about this almost James Bond style satellite, which produced this ray which had super vibrations, and it was targeted at somewhere on one of the fault lines, the seismic fault lines, and bang, it in James Bond style, with Dr. No in the background, we've got and of course the satellite log for that day disappeared. So it's a perfect loop. We've got the smoking gun. I don't actually believe. I think that was actually a decoy. I don't think they've got a satellite that can do that. I think that's all bullshit. We're allowed to say that word, aren't we?
Well, we're saying it now.
Right. Because we're going to say it a lot.
Okay.
So I think that was bullshit. And I think actually what happened, as is usual, is they piled a lot of explosives at some point where they wanted to create the effect. Maybe even these gum-sized nukes, chewing gum-sized nukes, and that's what actually caused the earthquake.
Yeah.
And I've got some direct references for that. The earthquake, and I can't remember the date of it, in Turkey, which killed 50,000 or more people, was caused by a naval accident deep underground, somewhere very near where all the damage was caused. And there's been some expert out there that has pinpointed that particular location as the epicenter or something like that. So we know from the Turkish earthquake, as alternative researchers that go and really delve into places that others don't go, that these bombs can cause earthquakes. So Haiti was caused by an explosion, a premeditated explosion, an experiment by very, very negative powers that obviously affect the world, in my opinion. The accident was Fukushima.
Okay.
So what happened was that actually hurt the planet. That was this dodgy knee we've got. The planet's now got this. It's been nobbled in the knee, and Fukushima afterwards was one of the spasms that took. But the planet doesn't work like our body. Instead of having a spasm in the knee, we have a spasm in the arm. So it goes along that fault line, and Fukushima got hit, as well as New Zealand have been hit twice.
Yes.
And that was dreadful. So they really, I suppose, if you want to bring the occult and you want to bring the divine into it, well, we're seeing payback, because I don't think the establishment would have wanted one of their wonderful cathedrals wrecked.
Yeah.
That certainly goes against the game plan. Also, obviously, Fukushima is largely misunderstood. We discussed that at length yesterday, and I should have looked for the source, to be quite honest. I haven't bothered. I've been that busy. But there is a source out there which talks about an anomaly in regards Fukushima. There was an initial 5.4, shall we say, strike on the Richter scale, and then immediately afterwards there was a localized spike of 8.1 or 8.2. And if you look at the brief that was written by the guys that built the plants, which I looked at, which was on rens.com, by the way. He's quite a useful source, and probably one of the only sources that keeps on vigilantly pumping out evidence for us on this. But there was and apparently it could withstand. It was built to withstand something like a 6+ Richter scale strike. So in fact, the original earthquake wouldn't have caused a problem. So they talk about the design fault. That wasn't it. I know through dark sources that US nuclear warheads were stored underneath the Fukushima reactor for safe cover. Now, there are rumors, how true these are, it sounds too farcical even for me to believe, that the warheads were earmarked for Iran. I find that illogical. I think they were insurance against China, and the negotiation table, all real negotiations with China are done via North Korea. So they've got the nukes there ready for North Korea if they need to use them. Well, they haven't now.
Yeah.
And
So
if you,
it did pin down the it's August 17th, 1999, the earthquake that you were talking about in Iran, and it says official death count is 17,127, but the official Turkish estimate, but however, it said that 50,000 people were injured, but many sources suggest that the actual figure may have been close to 45,000 dead and a similar number
yes,
injured.
yes, I've got my information from a Turkish academic, and he seemed to be very adamant that there were 50,000 dead.
Wow, that's an
Um,
untold amount of destruction.
and my wife is Thai, lives in Thailand more or less permanently, and she tells me not to believe anything in the media, that what they actually, the figures they report, certainly with what happens to Westerners, deaths to Westerners, are not reported correctly at all.
I bet. Well, they want to make people scared to go anywhere else, really.
Right, they've got tourism. They don't want people, you know. So yeah, so take everything that comes out of these official places with a very big pinch of salt.
Yes.
So where were we?
We were at
Because-
Fukushima, and you were saying that the nukes were stored underneath, which makes a lot of
Right.
sense. You had said in our conversation before, you had said that they like to store nuclear weapons because they can be tracked underneath pretty much almost every, or at least a lot of the nuclear plants, because that way they can pretend that they don't have them and they're harder to
Right.
detect.
Right. So apparently, and I haven't looked in how they do this, but apparently satellites can tell whether there are nuclear materials where they are. Obviously, they give off some kind of signature that they can read, and so obviously the logical place to hide nuclear weapons is either in or nearby nuclear facilities, you know, and you can say, oh well, this nuclear facility is being used just for power. What has Israel been saying about Iran?
Yeah.
Oh no, that's all a cover.
Well, always accuse the other side of what you're doing. I mean, always.
But I mean,
Part of
but why would Israel think they can get away with saying that unless, you know, that's what people do? So yes, that's what they do. They use they try and transport the you know, in the most inconvenient times, presumably. Again, I don't know whether they actually have a way of they dismantle them and they actually build them underneath the plant, so they just can't be detected. So you know, again, you'd have to talk to an expert to find the truth behind that.
Yes. So, you had mentioned the bubblegum stick nukes. I just wanted to cover
Yeah,
that really fast, um,
cool.
which is very interesting because there is interesting stuff about that. So there is this guy. His name is John McPhee, and he predicted like 20 years before the 1993 Trade Center bombing in his book The Curve of Binding Energy, where he quoted Theodore B. Taylor, a theoretical physicist out of Los Alamos, who said that someday someone was going to blow up the World Trade Center with a small nuclear device the size of a stick of gum. McPhee's book was published in 1975, although the prediction first appeared in New Yorker magazine in 1973. Taylor worked in the field of micronization of nuclear weapons. In other words, making nuclear weapons so small enough that the Israelis could carry them around in a briefcase. Now, I wanted to this. I actually have this PDF listed on the site. I'm going to put it in the current show notes, but it is listed on the first part of the show, like on revisingreality.com. You can go there. I have a lot of visual information, but you can find the link to John did this PDF there, which was a publication, a nuclear publication. Where is this? A Contact, the Phoenix Project, and it's dated April 20th, 1993. It's volume 1, number 4. and it's worth taking a look at. Is that's a very interesting read when he's talking to this guy and discussing this book in the newspaper article in this contact article. So I just wanted to cover that real
Yes.
quick and say somebody was saying there's no way they got bubblegum sticks because they discussed that, or we actually discussed that there's no way that there's almost no way that they were able to pull off, like there wasn't enough explosives, say at the Oklahoma City bombings or at the World Trade Center, because the World Trade Center in 1993 was equal to 1,200 pounds of TNT. I mean, how in the world did this get into the building? They say it was in some van or whatever it is, and that's insane to fit 1,200 pounds of TNT into a van. It just clearly couldn't do it. And then the idea that the Trade Center bombing, like there wouldn't have been able to fit enough explosives into Timothy McVeigh's thing. So
Sure.
they had to have had something bigger.
There is a link there which we can discuss later. I would say this, that I did actually check my cosmic sources. I did dial in there, and I've been told that no, we haven't got to the point where we can produce nuclear weapons the size of a stick of gum. We have got to the point we can produce them the size of about the size of a bowling pin. That's the feedback I've got.
That's still small as crap.
That's pretty bloody small. So in other words, you could stick it in your briefcase as you travelled, and providing customs never looked at it, you'd be fine. And of course, this is the criticism levelled against Cheney, that they said that he took those nukes on a trip to Japan because he was able to do it via diplomatic cover. Under his what's the company he owns? Huntsman or something like that.
Halliburton.
That's it. Halliburton. So he did it by them. And there's also theories out there which say that a lot of the drugs coming out of Afghanistan, the heroin, is actually transported via Halliburton. So which is another.
Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I mean, the CIA is black budgets. They basically funded off of the drug trade. That's the whole reason they're in.
Yes.
So let's move on. What's next after the small nukes, and they have them stored underneath there?
So I think we've pretty much covered that. They went boom. So what happened was the act of God, something they didn't predict, was this earthquake going off near Fukushima, which had been caused, as I say, as an act of revenge by God, if we can use the vernacular, and that triggered the detonation of all the bloody nukes underneath, which was a double disaster, because not only have they caused irreparable damage, which is going to come back to bite them as well as us, but they've lost all their nukes. Plus, they've also alerted. I mean, the Chinese aren't dumb. They can put these rumors that those nukes. The Chinese know damn well that those nukes were for them.
Yes.
Because it sounds to me, I'm sorry, I'll use a different word like horseshit. This idea that they're for Iran.
Yes. I mean, why in the world would they be for Iran and be stored in Japan whenever Israel's got plenty to go around for everybody in the Middle East?
Right, precisely. Now, I'm sure they could find a friendly ally there. Maybe Turkey or something like that.
Yeah, they've been installing them for years. I mean, all kinds of upper dictatorships everywhere. That's the whole point.
Yes, precisely. So, winding back even further, we discussed the other day about the 2004 event, a Christmas Day, I think it was. It's always spooked as Boxing Day, but it was at some part of the world, and I did look this up. It was Christmas Day. It was in Christmas Day where it was important. So it was really a Christmas Day attack on the Muslims. So by the Christian extremists, which is really what they are, the Puritan. It's a Puritan attack. And Puritans are really is another word, another name for Pharisees. And Pharisees is another word for Zionists. So it was a Zionist attack on the Muslims, and it was an attack on the moderate, on the cosmopolitan Muslims.
On that day exactly?
Yes, it was. It was. It's
No,
always you look at you. They say Boxing Day, but if you can imagine, it's actually yesterday in America, where it's tomorrow in Australia. Do you see what I'm saying?
yes, it was an Indian Ocean earthquake. Yes.
Yeah, so local time it may have been Boxing Day, but probably in American time, I'd imagine, which is really where the attack came, where they were the guys behind it. It would have been Christmas Day with the local time when the actual attack took place.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. So what they did is and we can talk about the ET aspect, I suppose, on the back of this. But I'm going to go through the mundane. I believe, or certainly sources have told me, that they blew up an underwater volcano in the Sumatran region, and it was on that fault line, and that triggered the tsunami, and again it all went wrong. It was much bigger than they predicted,
Yes.
and it caused a lot of problems that they didn't want.
Yeah, the undersea megathrust earthquake was caused when the Indian plate, well, they say it was caused when the Indian plate subjected by the Burma plate and triggered a series of devastating tsunamis along the coasts. And
Yes,
killed like 230,000 people in 14 countries. Inundated
right.
coastal communities with waves up to 100-foot high. It was one of the deadliest natural disasters in recorded history.
Yeah. Well, we both know it wasn't natural.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was 9.1 to 9.3 magnitude. That's massive.
Yes, yes,
Really massive.
yes. Yes, very, very bad indeed. So, and it was simply done by explosives. So I mean, the worry to me is, when when they hone these things, what the hell are they going to do? But so 2004. So that's one of the date lines. But we know that that's what they do. We've got 2001. Again, taking Judy Wood's explanation, that they're energy weapons and, it's really strange, out of this world technologies involved. That may have been Plan B. I'm not going to discount it. I'll give her credit where credit's due, but I think the Plan A and actually what happened was very mundane.
Yeah, so you were
And I
saying
think that
that it could be some form of weaponized explosive that we are not
I think
with,
so.
highly experimental, and that would have caused the crumbling away because really that's what happened. The whole tower is turned into dust, and you can watch it
Yes,
before your eyes. It's extremely strange to see.
yes,
Phenomena happen in front of your eyes because the whole thing kind of turns into dust. It's almost like
yes.
it's either like somehow burned or it's somehow melt. It's not even, you want to say melted. The whole thing just crumbles into dust. Dustification is the word she used, which was highly accurate to look at the evidence and say something really, really, really strange happened on that day.
Well, the explanation that I prefer, and I will call it an explanation rather than a theory, is the nanothermite explanation, and this apparently is technology which came out of Israel, which doesn't surprise me. And according to the explanation, it was so hot on the ground. The reason they took them so long to go in, they couldn't go in. It was white hot for weeks after the event. That's the reason it took them so long. Not because they were worried about the victims or they had any consecrational rights and all that bullshit. It was because they couldn't. They just couldn't get in. That's the reason they didn't go in. So, yeah. Yes, and it was obviously a big disaster. I think you were talking, which I wasn't. I mean, I haven't looked at it in vast amounts of detail, but you talked about cars blowing up and things like that.
Yeah, there was a bunch of random things that happened around it. There was a bunch of cars within the vicinity that just were blowing up, and one of the really strange things is that like there was 40,000, um, there's 40,000 different what's the word for it? Um, Filing cabinets within the building, and
Yes,
they're all gone. The only thing that's really survived was paper. I mean, you can't fit the wreckage of two 110-story buildings into what basically amounts to the the lobby area of the buildings. It's just not even possible. The whole thing turned into dust. All these filing cabinets disappeared. They did find one. It was the only one. It was crushed, like really strangely crushed. There was a lot of anomalous things that happened, like stuff akin to the Hutchinson effect. For those who don't know, Hutchinson has done lots of crazy experiments with frequency and being able to bend objects and do all kinds of strange things.
Yes.
Things with 0 point energy, things like that, and it's all kind of anomalous. And he's very much denounced and hated by the scientific community. They're like, oh, that's not perfect. It's not possible. He's just a hoaxer. We don't know how he's doing it, but it can't be possible. It does look like there might have been a form of cold fusion. He was messing around with like all kinds of cool stuff.
Okay.
He's done.
So, I mean, there is certainly a question out there. But maybe they run the two together. So I think the nanothermite is the explanation. That's what brought the buildings down. Whether that was aggregated by some of these other weird and wonderful techniques, and they were just trying to, they've got their plan A. They knew that was going to bring the building down, but they'll test all the other stuff as well because they weren't sure about it. They've never. You've got to think about it from an engineer's perspective. There's a big risk. We haven't used this bloody. Is it going to work? We've invested an enormous amount. They did it directly, for the 9 o'clock news or whatever it was. It was absolutely timed perfectly. But the big blunder, of course, was they killed the fireman. And I mentioned to you before and they couldn't use the 911 spruik. So again, if it was the Islamists, they were the dumbest Islamists on the planet. They picked the very day that actually aided the American propaganda campaign. So it just isn't logical. It just isn't logical. We also know, of course, that one of the reasons that was a cover because the Pentagon was being, and that's where Judy Wood's theory does intrigue me. That the way the Pentagon was hit is very odd. That it's not a plane, and there are eyewitnesses, and they didn't see a plane, they didn't see a missile, and it looked like some kind of holographic setup, but it didn't seem real to the people, some of the witnesses. It was very odd. Are they all liars? Are they all put up by the system? I don't know, but it just seems to be very odd. And we know the Pentagon it was a direct hit, it was a target hit, it was a deliberate strike to cause damage in a particular place.
Yes.
Not many people do know that particular day, of all days, happens to be the 60th anniversary of the inauguration, the foundation, sorry, of the Pentagon. Isn't that weird? That the Islamists, they picked that particular day. And a lot of people didn't know also that the Anderson Consulting were the accountants in there doing an audit because there was talk that the Pentagon was siphoning off trillions of dollars.
Yes.
Trillions of dollars. And do you know what happened? Well, oh my goodness. A lot of those poor Anderson, none of the Pentagon people are on site. They're all on holiday celebrating. But the Anderson Consulting people, they got killed. Yeah. They were the casualties. And what happened to Anderson Consulting?
What? I don't know. I
they don't exist anymore. They were done for fraud.
Wow. I mean,
wow.
It was $2.1 trillion. Donald Rumsfeld announced it missing the day before this whole thing happened. And the strange thing is the exact opposite, the exact office that those people were working in, the Anderson Consulting people, that was what was hit. And then whatever it is that hit the Pentagon was supposed to, like, they tried to track it or whatever, and it's supposed to have done a 270-degree corkscrew maneuver in order to hit this thing at the exact place and then balance. Like, I mean, there's not a pilot in the world that all said that it's impossible to do, especially with a Boeing 747, a huge plane like that, not hit anything on the way in and then somehow come out level with the ground and hit exactly that position. It's insane to think about how in the world that would be done. It could only be done through remote control, I think.
Well, the experts have said it's a missile strike, and I'll just take that one. So there's not really much more to be said on that. And all the pieces fit into place. And also, interesting you said about Rumsfeld, and I was aware of that. In fact, that's come out now. It's been whittled down to billions, but there has been some sort of movement forward. in the process. I read an article relatively recently over the last year or two. As I say, the missing amount is in the billions now. They whittled it down from trillions, but that's not what that isn't what I wanted to talk about. On the same day that Rumsfeld made that announcement, President Bush was in a lunch meeting with the is it the Carlyle Corporation, the Carlyle Group,
Yes.
and that was Osama bin Laden's brother of all people. Isn't that weird?
Oh man, they've been the Bushes and the Saudis and bin Laden have been friends forever because they were making each other rich. Like the bin Ladens were good friends with the Bushes for many years before this event.
Yes.
And suddenly he's pinned as like the target. I mean, and there are rumors flying around that he's still alive somewhere. You know,
let me just
killed him.
Let me just flesh it out and put a bit of meat on that bone for you. The relationship was this: that the Bushes are still, I think, own a company over there called Zapata. And Zapata used to be a ferrying company, so they used to ferry the oil barrels, and that was their relationship in the oil industry. And then sometime later they got into the oil business. And guess what? Do you remember that there was this company that Saddam was jumping up and down talking about slant drilling in his oil fields in Iraq? Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. And that was one of the.
Do you know the name of that company? Do you know the name of that company?
No, I do not. Was it Zapata?
I'll give you a guess. I'll give you one guess. Yeah, Zapata. You've got it.
Oh man.
Now,
it's crazy.
The relationship with the Carlyle Group was the Carlyle Group used to build so they're concreters and they used to build the infrastructure. So they used to build the ports and things like that. So, you know, there is form there. There is a connection, and I've got no doubt about that.
That is crazy, and actually that makes a lot of sense because, you know, they've been doing this stuff around the world, and it's all about the petrodollar, really. Or at least some of it is about the petrodollar. Some of it's about control. And then I've heard a lot of interesting things about the Earth. So the Earth, I would absolutely say that the Earth is a living organism. And any living organism generally has like what is termed as chakras or energy points. And so there would be energy points all across the world. Well, apparently some of the first energy points as the planet, you know, begins to throw off this domination control system, as the planet begins to wake up and try to wake us up. Some of the first ones to awaken should be the heart. I think it was termed as heart chakras, but there's some very important chakras and energy vortexes in the Middle East. Apparently, there's one in Syria, but there's some like they're all over the Middle East. And so what they're doing with these wars is killing and sacrificing blood on top of these heart chakras or on top of these earth chakra points in order to try to retard them and keep them from awakening, because it will help spring forth the earth itself as awakening. So therefore, there
might be something in that. Ironically, the White House is on one of the very strong grid points. It's been built over it. You know, again by accident. I didn't know that.
Well, it's funny because a lot of the major cities are built on these things, and you have all this dirty energy from all these people who are unaware of the larger energy things that we do. So it's very interesting to see, you know, this play out on the world scale as people are harmed, you know, on these things, and it retards, you know, the Earth from trying to do anything about it. You know what I mean? Like the Earth is trying to wake up and trying to overthrow these people, and they're, you know, sacrificing these things. And another thing is a lot of the nukes that have been set off, even the test ones, they've all been over these kinds of chakras, these kinds of energy points on the Earth, in line with the ley lines and such. So, like, they're very aware that they're throwing off this kinds of energy into the Earth system in order to try and I don't know if they're trying to piss it off, but they are trying to keep her off, if you want to call, you know, her Gaia or, you know, whatever. But it's very interesting that they're doing this.
We're moving into the Draco before time, but I will get onto them in about 2 seconds.
Just a moment, please?
Yeah,
Let
sure.
me interrupt for just a moment. I'm in the chat, and you have an audience member that asked a question, and I threw it up there
I
in.
see that. Yeah.
Yeah. He asked, Zippy asked, "What do you mean Hutchinson is done?" I think if you could elaborate on that idea a little bit.
Oh, well, I didn't actually. I sent that to Noreen because she put the same thing up there. I didn't mean to say Henderson was done. If I did, it was a misunderstanding. Or Hutchinson, I mean. I just said he had some very interesting experiments, and had some and a lot of the anomalous things he's created through frequencies have been observed in the wreckage of the 9/11 towers. So it's something to keep in mind. Actually, if you look at Judy Wood's site again, um, then you can find a whole bunch of pictures. If you look for the Hutchinson on here on her thing, like she'll have a link to his stuff, and she'll have a bunch of pictures of like his stuff, his experiments with like solid copper pipes being bent and all that kind of interesting things. And then like going to the Twin Towers, the wreckage, and seeing these giant support beams that are just bent, and they're not bent by like force of something coming down on them, because they should have technically broken. But they look like a giant, like just basically grabbed them on both ends and just like twisted them like into a knot. I wasn't saying anything negative about Hutchinson. He is a very fascinating researcher and experimenter, and I like to see his stuff.
Yeah, beautiful.
So
I don't think I can add to that.
You do?
No, I don't. There's nothing I can add.
Okay. So yeah, you were going into you said something about the Draco, but then you stopped and said we were going to do something else really quick first. We have
Yeah,
about
very quickly.
10
I
minutes.
wanted to create. Yes, I noticed that.
Okay.
I want to just create the links. So if we look at 911, we presume that the explosives explanation is correct. And we see all those cars blowing up, which was a little bit of an incidental. That they weren't widely promoted. And then we go back to Oklahoma in 1993, and we've got Timothy McVeigh, a nutter, driving around with his van laden with explosives, which the experts say, by the way, couldn't have even smashed the windows of the building, let alone bring it down. Absolutely impossible, implausible.
Yes.
So I say that was a professional demolition job. And then we move across to Bali. Was that 2004? I forget the date. A lot seems to be happening in 2004.
How do you spell Barley?
BALI bombing.
Aha, BALI. Oh yeah, the Bali bombing. Okay, Bali. Bali. Your accent there got me that time. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's Indonesia. It's in Indonesia. There was only a few people called, only 200 and odd, and most of them were Australian, so who cares, But
the 2002 or the 2005?
I think it was 2005 then.
Okay, that's what I was looking for.
So that was the Australian incident.
Yeah.
Because it was done at a place where a lot of Australians, it was a very popular bar that Australians went to. Again, the standard thing: a military or private van outside, laden with explosives, is the official explanation. The unofficial one is a guy with backpack actually just bunged it near one of the support pillars, and that brought the building down. But having said that, even that seems a little far-fetched, and I wouldn't be surprised if they'd actually wired it before. So I'm just seeing a pattern here. I think it's a fairly obvious one. They're doing professional demolition jobs. They tried to use the plane as a decoy in the 911 building. It didn't have any effect. Do you remember years ago there was this guy who drove his 1 or 2 seater little plane into the tax office in somewhere like Texas?
I remember that. I do think I've heard of that. Yes.
And it didn't bring the building down. I think probably the plane's still there, to be quite honest.
There is also I think it was it was somewhere in the 1940s, 1950s, a B-2 or some kind of the fighter, a B-38 or something like that, the fighter bomber.
Yes.
The full-on bomber. No, B-52 Spirit, I think it was, and it flew into the Empire State Building, and it didn't bring that down. Also, there's recorded at least, I think it's up to 121 plus. Somewhere around there, but there's been 121 plus steel structure skyscraper fires throughout history, and none of them brought the building down. I mean, we've seen them on live TV recently. I think it was in, was it in crap? I can't remember where it is. It's that one place, Qatar, I think it was, or it was around
Oh
that.
yes, yes.
Anyway, there was a huge one, and there was one in China recently as well, and you could see on TV there's all this fire engulfing the entire building. We didn't see that on 9/11. I mean,
No.
none of these buildings came down either. I mean, a lot of them
No.
were repaired and put back into service. There was a big one in
Yes.
Chicago, and it's
Yes.
crazy to see that, and then to look at 9/11 and see that these are the only 3 buildings on record to have fallen due to a quote-unquote steel structure skyscraper fire. It's kind of
Yes.
ridiculous, actually.
Well, they're just playing on ignorance. I wanted to now just introduce the Draco, which is a more of a teaser to get people in after the break. You know, we've got to keep them here, I think.
Oh, I think they're interested, but I would.
So we're now getting into the spooky stuff, and I can say that there was a lot of ET presence directly after Fukushima.
Okay. It makes
And I can say
there's so much, there's a lot of different stories out there about the, and witness testimony about the ETs messing around with, the nukes and such on nuclear military bases and being able to switch them off. There's a lot of testimony about that from guys who were highly decorated military officers, or at least they were, honored
yes,
military officers.
yes, and times, and they know, the military know that they can do things that we can't do.
Yes.
And there's no way they can, basically they can come in and step in at any time they want, but they don't. So, so that's that. The feedback I said to you yesterday, the feedback I had from the Draco, and I do have a direct link in. I'm not sure I want it, but I've got it, whether I like it or not. And they are very, very pissed off by what's happened, because it was premeditated, even though it was an accident. But because Haiti was premeditated, you know, anything that happens as a consequence of that, they will deem that party responsible for it. And because Fukushima has actually affected their world, they're not in our dimension. They have informed me there will be payback.
Okay. And I wouldn't blame them. I mean, the nukes. It seems to me that the amount of UFO sightings spiked after the nukes started going off on this planet, after they were developed again. I want to say again because there's evidence to suggest that there was nukes in the past detonated across the world.
Yes.
But there is there's a lot of evidence to suggest that all of a lot of UFO sightings, it all spiked after they started happening, and they seem to have a really crazy interest in the nukes. So what do you mean when you say that bridges over into their world?
Their whole sense of reality is different to ours. All the rules change. So we're very much governed by our perception and by our senses. And by our physicality, and that's why we live in the age of materialism, because science can't see beyond that, unfortunately, even though we are a lot more than that. That changes in different dimensions. So for instance, in dimension 5, you can think yourself to a position, and that position could be 200 light years away. And you just, because you've decided you're going to be there, that's where you are, and it's instantaneous. So we can't do that. That's fantastical stuff as far as we're concerned. We have to get on a bus or a plane or a spaceship and travel there. Whereas you get to a certain dimension, you just think yourself there. So all the rules change. I haven't been informed how Fukushima has affected them, because some of the negative things that happen to us here don't affect them at all. But it has in some way. I don't think they would give me that information. I probably, go into source, but why do I really want to? I mean, it's not my concern. It doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect us. Fukushima, as it stands in the material effect, bloody well affects us. So, yes. But all I can say is it has affected them, and they are really pissed off by that. And you don't want to piss off a Draco. And after the break, I think we can discuss about how, how dangerous the Draco are.
All right, sounds good. And looks like we're coming up with
Because
a topic now. Yes.
Okay.
Welcome back, everyone, to Revising
Hi.
Reality. So, I did want to mention this because if I didn't say this in the beginning, it's just because I'm excited because it's such an awesome show and I have a lot of fun doing this. But this is on a listener-supported radio station, completely and totally. So if you want to support the radio station, they give out seed packs and there's merch available, and there's also access to archives. I think for around $5 a month, and you can get access to all the archives for every show here. I do attempt to do, after a couple of days, a YouTube video for each show, so that you can get access to my show. But I will try to consistently plug the station as much as I can, because there's a lot of amazing hosts on here, and it is entirely listener supported to keep the server up and all that. So I do really appreciate that. So without further ado, Crystal and Steve are still on with me now. Crystal wanted some things to share about Fukushima and the plume-gate and Patrick Henry.
Yeah,
I say that right. I always say it backwards because he's got
he
it back.
does. I have an article here that I want to read to the show listeners. It's called Top 10 Reasons Why Plume-gate and the NRC FOIA Transcripts Pertaining to Fukushima Are Being Suppressed. And this is from Patrick Penry, Hatrick, Penry, Penry.wordpress.com. And this was published August the 13th, 2012. And I'm going to go ahead and start reading this. I hope I don't lull you guys to sleep. But
You won't.
anyways, not long after I wrote about the NRC FOIA documents pertaining to Fukushima and the vast multi-agency conspiracy to hide the radioactive plume and fallout from American citizens, I realized that alternative media was, for the most part, avoiding the subject. And how many subjects have they avoided? Quite a bit. And I think Tim and I will get into that in future shows. I'm hoping we will.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And we continue on here with, I had been a huge fan of Alex Jones for several years, even paying for a subscription to Prison Planet. But when I considered how big this conspiracy was and the number of deaths involved, I knew something was terribly wrong when Mr. Jones and his organization remained silent on the matter. I had never written for the alternative media before, and neither have I, and just assumed it was everything I had imagined it to be. I thought they reported on all of the difficult subjects that the mainstream would not. Boy, was I wrong. I wrote Plume-gate shocker, media silence raises troubling questions, when I realized that InfoWars and Prison Planet had no intention of reporting on this blockbuster story, even though I had sent them all the information, links to specific NRC FOIA documents, and a copy of my article. I haunted the Alex Jones channel on YouTube, posting links to my article and pointing out that InfoWars wouldn't touch the NRC Fukushima FOIA transcripts with a 100-foot pole. Finally, in desperation, I wrote Alex Jones, Trolled In Shield Network Exposed, and it was picked up by Alexander Higgins and retitled Operation Mockingbird Style Alternative Media CIA Infiltration Exposed. Anytime you guys want to chime in and interject or have something to say, please feel free, Tim and Steve.
Keep going, though.
And published.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess I'm back now. I've actually been on mute, so I missed some of what you said, but you did give me a little bit of a lead in. I'm very conscious of the topic, and I wanted to cover them. I thought it was only fair to the audience to cover everything that you said you discuss on the show. So before I talk about the radio, you picked up Alex Jones. I don't want to pick on him because I like him. I think he's a fun presenter. But you were talking about rogue funds, Soros funds and guys like that getting into the alternative scene, producing these movements. What is it, the Occupy movement and things like that. And people are now starting to get very unclear as who's the good guys and who's the bad guys out there.
Right. I agree
So
with
what I wanted, yeah, what I wanted to do is just clear a few things up, and firstly say yes, there are obviously funds which there are some that are funded like Alex Jones, that have stakeholders that may require a particular information threads to be pushed. Will certainly require specific information threads to be pushed, and others to be basically squashed. You know, so you're not gonna hear certain things on Alexei's show because his stakeholders just say no, we're not gonna have that. That's and so they do shape. To the mainstream media, they do shape the audience's mindset because eventually, after you've heard the drum being beaten for a very long period of time over the years, you start to tune in with that drum. Now, this actually comes to one of the problems that also a lot of people haven't got a vast knowledge. Can I say that they haven't got
Yes.
these extraordinary gifts, and I guess that's something that has been sort of that finger's been pointing at me. People constantly, how the hell do you store all that stuff in your head? Because I don't Google, so I none of that stuff that I've mentioned today I haven't referred anywhere. It's all been in my head. That's
Yeah.
probably why half of
That's
it's inaccurate.
great.
But
That's great
that's
stuff
a tip.
too. Have such
So
great memory.
so
The
very
stuff that I pull up, I try to remember as much as I possibly can
yes
and keep it in my head, even if I might have to refresh my memory from now time to time. Like, do
yes
manage to remember an awful lot as well. It's a good skill to have. It's something that I think some of these people call them gifts. I think it's a lot of it's training. I mean, if you keep your mind
yes.
sharp and you continue to work at it, even if you're starting at square one, you can still do it. It's
Well, sign me up.
Yes, yeah, sure. Just imagine this. I mean, I wrote a post on Aussie Thinker, which is spelt with two Z's, or Z's, you call them, OZZIE Thinker, .wordpress.com. And I did a I did a post. Most recent one is called the mindset of psychosis. And really, what I say is that everybody essentially, or the majority, parrot what they believe in. They're not very good at finding the truth. What they do is they attach themselves to a message which fits, and then they go and regurgitate that message. So what we're seeing in the alternative media is a sort of a message of a particular flavour without too much thinking going on, other than certain great writers. I mean, I'm a follower of John Rappaport,
I
who
do
does
like
all
him.
his vaccines, GMOs. Gordon Duff, who Veterans Today. I mean, there are other writers I don't like there, but Gordon Duff always, you know, always seems to think outside the square. And there are a whole host of other guys out there, really intelligent journalists that think they don't go with the flow. And you usually know you've got a good one because they tend to say things that other people don't, and they contradict other people.
Yeah.
So that's really that's that in a nutshell. So I think that you can point the finger. You can say yes, there are rogue fundamental elements behind the alternatives, and definitely that's part of the picture. They know the whole reason that the mainstream media is in place is because there are very powerful stakeholders that want to shape people's opinions.
I was
Yes.
just
And obviously the alternative is part of that plan, and so they've now got a plan B, and of which the alternative shapes the opinions in a slightly different way, but ultimately still pretty
funded.
much down the path that they want us to go.
Mhm. Yeah,
Really
and
sad.
there's not an original thought out there.
Well,
Yep.
there are a few, but most of those are the ones that people really rebel against. They say, "Oh no, that's not right because such and such says it." I love David Icke.
I do
The
too.
trouble is, the trouble is he peddles a lot of bullshit as well.
Yeah, like
Unfortunately,
yeah.
I mean, I love the even just the title of his book, "Human Race, Get Off Your Knees." I think that's
yes,
something that everybody should do, but at the same time,
yes,
I don't always trust everything he says. I mean, he's very, I don't know, some of the stuff that he says is ridiculous, but he is very good at putting out some information. Especially, he's been covering the pedophilia for a very long time. I was seeing that all the time in my Facebook feed. Like he was just going like, you know, all in, I should say, against the pedophilia ring, which is worldwide, really. It's really sad how they get people like hooked on this kind of stuff and then let that be their blackmail information if these guys ever step out of line. I mean, that's really one of the main, besides, keeping control on the media and not allowing anybody to think outside the box and be promoted at all.
Yeah, to
It's one
have
of the
their
main
own.
control.
Yeah, that's one thing about being a part of quote unquote the truth movement. I do
Yes.
feel that you have to have your own things to stand up for.
Yes.
I'm not here to agree with everyone 100% on anything. I
Yes.
can still respect the individual, but not agree with their opinion. I can still
Sure.
respect them even with the
Sure.
difference of opinion.
I think
And
I think I think the mistake people make is they try and negotiate the truth, and the truth is unnegotiable.
right,
And I get into these battles every now and again with quite with well, I suppose I'll call them intellectuals, with quite bright people, and they seem to think that their arguments can transcend the truth. But of course, the truth is the truth, and never the twain will meet. Agreed that a lot of the time the truth has many sides, but ultimately the truth is still the truth.
Yes.
And your paedophilia is a very interesting one. I'm afraid I'm probably going to go against you on this in quite a big way.
Hmm.
And I see it from I've studied it for about 20 or more years, actually. I've spent actually studying that as a phenomenon. It's a great interest. I see that as bringing down humanity, actually. It's destroyed families, this
Yes.
whole setup. If you actually think about it, and we could do a separate show on this, but I'm going to keep it down to about 5 minutes or 3 minutes or however quickly I can do it. But
Okay.
if you think about
take
it, I
your
mean,
time.
if you think about it, if you actually look at the standards, if we just look at the concept pedophilia, that it all started really with the Romans, which they said the age of consent was 12 years, and then that changed with Gladstone in England in about the 1880s, and he changed the standard to 15, and then and he was really getting somewhere with that, and then he changed the standard again and made it 16, and then more recently we've seen. And nobody's explained how it happened, why they came up with this magic figure of 18, but now officially, 1 millisecond before your 18th birthday, you're a child, and then you somehow a millisecond later morph into an adult, even though you might have been born. Some are born at 3 in the morning, and others are born at closer to midnight. And there's this gap of several hours, but in each case, there's this magic thing that happens where somebody magically changes from a child into an adult. Um, so obviously the writing's on the wall just from an intellectual perspective in terms of how can that happen.
The interesting thing, I think, is one of the things I just want to point out really fast is
Yes.
legality. I mean, why is it that suddenly, if it's written in the law, that somehow it's right or somehow it's wrong because it's supposed to be against some law when it's man's law? And does man's law really mean anything in the cosmic sense? Because it's just some
Well,
on a piece of paper.
yes,
And
precisely,
I wanted to
that's what.
really quickly was the actual definition of pedophilia is like a Greek. I think it's Greek and Latin, and then it just basically like one means child, and the other one means love. And if you're a parent, then you technically are participating in the term. Now, obviously, it has a negative connotation now in our culture, and that's what I was referring to. But I think you brought up a couple of very valid points there. I wanted to point that out because I don't think a lot of people think of it in boiling down the terms um, into their root definitions. But I think we really need to do that. Like, say, government technically means mind control. There's
Well,
a lot of them. There's a lot of
well,
like if you go down to the root of the word and where it came from. There's a lot of control, I think, in the English language, and I think that's built in on purpose.
well, you've hit the nail on the head actually there, because in fact it comes from the Greek, which is pedos, which is child. You're right, and philia. Ironically, the common word we use is philosophy, and they had actually the Greeks had three words for love. One was eros, which is a sexual love. Um, Agape, which was the spiritual love, and philos, which meant to be of the same mindset. So pedophilia means that you're on the same wavelength of children. So there was a movement in the 1880s, 1890s that created the term more as a way to be accepted, I guess. So isn't that weird? Because if you wanted to use it as a slur, you'd call them pedoros, because that would be the pedo and pedos and eros. So you'd have pedoros or eropeds. Eropeds. That's what you'd have. So the whole thing's ridiculous. And if you see the absolute frenzy the mainstream has gone over this, which has really put the FBI on the map. Then you get into the conspiratorial aspect, and I actually think that the Catholics that are targeted, and also the Israelites as well. You know that their rabbis are targeted as well. You don't see that in our bloody mainstream, no. But it's all Israel's behind this, by the way. The chemical castration, they came up with that legislation. And Russia Putin stuck his hand up straight away and said, "Oh, I'll take that." So you can see all sorts of links coming out here. So we talk about that's a conspiracy in itself. I believe that the good Catholic priests are being targeted on trumped-up charges because they never have any evidence. It's all on somebody stands up and says, "Oh yes, they did that to me," and they cry in court and they basically perjure themselves to death, and they sometimes have 10 or 12 of these people. And as I explained, my mother went through this experience in the court where she got drenched by an Indian national who was driving a taxi back in the 1960s or 1970s. And do you know what? He got about 30 of his family members to testify that they were nowhere near the bloody incident. It was out in the sticks. She was walking down this bloody lonely road, and she was lucky to get his number plate, and the court laughed him out.
Wow.
In today, today they'd have been, they were all right, all these witnesses, they lied through their bloody teeth. Yeah. And so that's what I'm seeing. That's my and of course this is the problem with the alternatives. They've been backed by powers that want to either attack the Catholics, which is Rosicrucian order, or they want to attack the Zionists, which is Zionism.
Yes. And you know what? That's a very interesting way of looking at it. I haven't looked at it that deep yet. I was just like seeing some of the strange things with that Seville character in England, and then I know that the Satanists do practice this. If you talk to say Jay Parker, so I want him on here at some point or another, but he had horrible experiences with the Satanists in in New Jersey, and that's not very far from me at all. They do have an awful lot of power within the structure, and Satanists really don't worship Satan as exposed by Mark Passio. Like he used to be a Satanist, and then he left it because he figured out that basically their whole purpose is to create personal power and they're personal power at the expense of others, and then they basically have a lot of people in high up positions all over the place in media, academia, law, everywhere. Yes. And they like to attack other people, and they do whatever they can to increase their power at the expense of all others. And they don't they don't care about anybody else, and they like to promote solipsism. And you had mentioned the truth earlier. I like to say that the truth is a triple-edged sword, and that you have your side, their side, and the truth. And that there's an objective truth. You know what I mean? There isn't. I hate it when people try to say, "Well, it's all in your head." No, it's not. The Satanists promote that for other people, but they themselves understand that there is an ultimate truth, or that there is, a truth. And I like when Mark Passio likes to bring up that as human beings, if we want to become more powerful for ourselves without hurting anyone, one of the things we need to do is increase our perception so that it aligns with the truth. Our job is to discover it. Not to misalign it or to just pick sides or that stuff. So it ties in right what you're saying.
Okay, let me just you've produced a brilliant bridge, and it's going to take probably about 20 minutes for me to work through everything you've said. And I've noticed a note here from Crystal saying if we can get onto the Draco next, that would be good for me. And that's what we're going to do. But I think I need to give you a background because the Satanist very much ties in with this. Firstly, I'm going to give my book another plug. That's The Beauty of Existence Decoded.
Yes.
If you can go and Google that, it's actually going to be it's planned to be one of a series of 11 books, maybe 12. And the next one is going to be called A New World Order. If I ever get round to it, this is an e-book, by the way. The Beauty of Existence Decoded is an e-book, but the next one is going to be probably a solid physical hard book, and it's not about conspiracies. It's actually talking about this planet going back millions of years, and that's what I'm talking about, A New World Order. In the Beauty of Existence, I talk about something called the Satan Star, which happened to be the very first star, and this was when when existence happened, and it opened things up, and then unfortunately that star became corrupt, and the Satanists apparently worship the black sun, something called the Black Sun. That is the original Satan Star and what it's become. It's no less spiritual than any other star, but what happened was that you've got to go back to the Gnostic text to get a good metaphoric analogy, but essentially, and I know that you're probably going to have listeners that say, "Oh, no, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God." Well, that's fine. That's fine. And don't put, the bearded man sitting on a cloud or whatever other contextual, sort of imagery you have. That isn't the God that I'm talking about. I'm talking about God as a system, and the system was slumbering for a very long time. Essentially indefinitely slumbered, was asleep, and for some reason it woke up. And the spontaneous point of waking, it broke into two halves of itself, and one half is known as the male, which isn't quite the male as it manifests here, as in our males, and the other half was the female, and again wasn't quite like the female qualities that manifest here, but they're good divides. And I discuss this in my book in quite a lot of detail, but these refracted, etc., etc. One of the problems was there was I suppose we'll call it a disagreement that didn't really manifest or didn't really congregate, but there was clearly a disagreement. So when the male aspect was sleeping, the female decided that she would go and send all her personality or character out into this manifest domain, and not manifest as we know it, but in one of the higher dimensions, and that was essentially just an existence of light.
Okay.
And of course, what do you think happened when the male aspect woke up? They said, "Well, we're going to go out there as well. We're going to join them." And so all this male aspect, which manifests as what we haven't discovered, which we theorize, which science has theorized is dark matter, came out into the universe too. And it how there's a sail on and there's this great big stampede. When everybody goes to the door and it gets clogged. Have you ever seen that in these sails and they can't get in because they're all rushing so hard to get in? Well, that's essentially what happened to the poor old Satan Star. The opening got clogged and banked up and blocked, and gradually just there's this bigger and bigger and bigger immense force banked up. And it's interesting to me that Stephen Hawking is to some way corroborating this, because he's now saying that black holes not only suck matter, they actually spew it out. Well, the sucking matter is utter crap. They don't suck matter at all. They only push matter out. God help us if that explodes. It will engulf us.
Very interesting.
So that's the true Satan. That's the real Satan. So the Satanists are something else. They just use the word. Somebody did explain to me why that was years ago, but I don't think it's very important. What I will say is that the occultism side possibly started back in the bloody Middle Ages, but it got refined, very much notably refined by about the 1870s, 1880s. really when the Illuminati orders, the Illuminati and the other Masonic orders were becoming quite visible. Do you know what I'm saying? They weren't so much behind the scenes. They were really getting quite active.
Yes.
They were trying to recruit. And this is where they started to do some very strange stuff where they were trying to connect with the other side, mediums. And we hear about the negative aspect of that, particularly with Hitler and the Thule movement.
Yes.
Thule, if anybody wants to Google that. That's can also link with Madame Blavatsky and some of the spiritual stuff that was coming out of the Theosophical movement. That sort of connects in with that, and a lot of the Nazi guys, when Hitler was supposedly destroyed, a lot of the Nazi guys then were moved to strategic positions in the US, particularly in NASA, in the CIA, and the Pentagon.
Project Paperclip, very large.
Yes, yes, yes. But Paperclip, of course, is the front. You're not going to get any truth out of these guys. They're not going to tell you what actually happened, but Paperclip gives you an indication.
Yeah.
And so the Pentagon also, that there's a guy called Dietrich. I've forgotten his first name. But he was a librarian, ex-librarian, military librarian, and he talks about the chaplain of the Pentagon at the time, back in the 50s, then set up the Temple of Set.
Okay. Really,
so
put this out there for the listeners and for you. There is
yes.
a really interesting movie that came out not that long ago. It's called Captain America: Winter Soldier, and in that they basically show like almost a civil war going on between what is termed Hydra for them, but they tie this Hydra organization, which is their kind of a fictional like a Nazi, almost even
Yes.
like a Nazi kind of organization that works inside the U.S. government and kind of subverts it, which is
Yes.
very interesting that they come out with this in a movie. But any rate, in this movie, they show this civil war basically starting between the Captain America and his little team, and they're trying to go up against this
Yes.
big powerful organization that is connected politically, corporately, and all this stuff. And it all started with Project Paperclip, that they say literally in the movie. And then they go on
Yes.
and show these things, which was very interesting. David Wilcock actually came out and said, one of his insiders said that these things are actually real, and they are they are absolutely exactly the same thing, but that they had these big cloaked, or they had these big carriers that were like, they had like 4 engines on them, and they could like float indefinitely, and they were like flying in the air, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if they actually have these things, but in other words, they're supposed to be cloaked, and that they can they basically fly around the world, and they can go anywhere they want, and they can put weapon systems wherever they really want them. I don't know if that's necessarily true, if they have access to that kind of technology, because these things technically use some kind of hover technology. They don't, they don't operate on normal principles if they do exist. But David Wilcock was saying that if there is a civil war going on, this was kind of like between different fractions of the domination control system, the different secret societies that are trying to take control of the world, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
If there's a civil war going on, that this is kind of what's going on behind the scenes.
That may be true, but there's a lot of sort of fairy tale qualities to that. The guy I'm thinking of actually was Douglas Dietrich. And again, he built in a lot of stuff like that, which is, again, I haven't written too much in the way of evidence for it. We've got these tales, but not much to back them up. And I've noticed some of these. One of the commenters has talked about the Vril Society. Again, I just wanted to use these as examples rather than to focus on them. So the thought movement, and then the Pentagon. Douglas Dietrich talked about a character called Michael Aquino. I think he was a colonel or major, and he was the chaplain. And then he set up the Temple of Set, and there was also a guy called LaVey who set up the Church of Satan.
Yeah, the public one, not necessarily the one. I don't think.
Yes. So Aquino was apparently the guy who essentially oversaw the Pentagon's own version of the Thule movement.
Okay.
And this is where they connected in with the other side as Satan, and that's the Satanist connection, to get very special powers.
Okay. Very
Boom,
interesting.
boom, boom.
Really.
Yes, we should need the spooky background music.
Yeah.
Now,
Um, um, Crystal had put out
the,
that Peter Levenda has a lot of good information on the Thule and the
yes,
Thule Society, and that's I just want to throw
yes.
there real quick. Keep going. It's awesome.
Yes. Okay. So now let's go back to reality and look at the more mundane and try and make some sense of this. Um, you, let's suppose. No, I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna put my foot down. I'm gonna say there are these entities that are adrift often of our dimension, um, and they do have a vested interest with what goes on here on Earth, not necessarily in association with us, but they could have a vested interest in association with us. And I would say they do have a vested interest given our DNA, which I'll come to later. But let's go to the mundane about this bridge between using mediums to connecting with them, and some some of the things that could be achieved by that. Well, we know that that there have been certainly techniques that have been divined through via extraterrestrial sources. It's been alleged that, in fact, all our computer technologies were discovered both by re-engineering downed alien spacecraft, but also this method of communication where it's no good just having the bloody, they need to know how to get into it, and that was how they managed to decode, and they created our computers are basically based on that that work that's been done.
Okay.
So that's a practical example. Now, again, this goes back to what you believe. Where does inspiration come from? You know, is it Steve Jobs was the Apple guy?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
He's the guy who died. He claimed he was on an LSD trip when he did all his creative work, when he got all his ideas for Apple.
Okay. Wow.
Now, ironically, this ties in with not just David Icke, but others have recognized that people in altered state seem to be able to connect in to the network.
Yes. I just want to say that really quick. It seems to be able, the DMT compound seems to be able to clue in as a human being to it's a source to clue you into the cosmic senses, and I think it goes through kind of your right brain. You know, like you have your left brain, which is logical and the ego, and your right brain is like creative functions and music and all that kind of stuff. And we can train ourselves to be able to bring in more of that if we want to try to do that.
The best, the most effective medium, the most effective way is via, and guess it, marijuana.
That's my.
Why do you think the powers have tried to stop that?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Notice that if I smoke a little bit, then I tend to be able to focus in a lot more, think way more deeply. It does make me a little bit more oblivious to the world, but it also makes me think way more deeply about a particular subject and gets me in the art mood or writing mood or clues me into a lot of interesting things and makes me, it brings up a lot of material for me as well for the show. It helps everything, I think, and it's wonderful.
It exposes different genetics as well. I've done a lot of interviews, and I'm not going to say it's across the board, but I'm pretty much convinced that I'm onto something. I've done a lot of interviews with Negroes who, you know, when they've admitted they've smoked a joint, I've been out. I actually see people as lizards. Their people change. They actually morph into lizards. and they see lizard men walking, and they know, and it's a particular type of person as well. And ironically, the Draco in one form are lizards, or perhaps not ironically.
I just want to throw this out there. It reminds me a lot of a particular movie I've seen. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen that. Very interesting movie with Johnny Depp. Really hilarious, actually. But he's like walking around, he's like on LSD and smoking some pot or whatever, and he's like seeing people as lizards, and he's like freaking out because he has no idea what he's seeing, and he's like hallucinating, and he has no idea what's going on. It's pretty funny. But it does tie into that, and I think a lot of people who haven't tried anything like that, maybe you just watch it just to be like, okay, could be the if you don't freak out about it, it could be interesting. But if you do freak out about it, then it could be rough.
Well, there's another even better series, is an old series to watch, is one simply called V, and this was proposing that all various leaders in strategic places were actually lizards, and they were ripping off their masks, and you could actually see, and some of the lizards surprisingly were good, and they joined. And I thought it was actually very represented. I'm only thinking back. I would have been, I won't say a kid, but sort of in my 20s at the time the series was running, perhaps even before. So it's quite old, maybe 30 years ago, I'm assuming. And yes, it was very interesting.
There is a movie called They Live, which was an 80s film, and they had these special sunglasses that allowed them to see people as, aliens, and they looked really strange, but it was like a movie. And then if you looked at the billboards with these things on, it said, obey, consume. If you ever see anything about that, it's pretty awesome. If you ever get a chance to watch it, it's worth it, because these guys basically try to resist after they find out this is going on. It's very much an 80s.
Yes.
It's kind of a B movie, but it's one of the best. It's one of the best B movies.
Yes.
And it's really fascinating. They put on these glasses and you can see it, and they end up sneaking into a base and seeing like some kind of Stargate where these guys like jump ship and go to other galaxies and stuff from this place. It's all fascinating. It's just kind of a fun, wacky ride. But they do attempt to resist the system after getting these glasses and try to like distribute them to all kinds of people.
I've just a sort of a message here that's popped up. And I've actually watched Douglas. I've actually attended a presentation by Douglas Dietrich in Sydney. He's one of the only other guys I've known, I've personally met, that can talk non-stop for 5 hours, and like me. But apparently he's got a show on this network. Isn't that great? It's on Tuesday and Saturday, 10 to midnight, Eastern Standard Time on Studio A.
Okay, yeah, I was going to bring that up too, so that
okay,
mentioned.
All right, well, you can do maybe.
Very interesting.
Perhaps I'm doing your job. I do apologize.
No, I don't care. That's fine. And you saw it before I could bring it up, so that's excellent.
Where were we? So you're talking about the Draco. So these mediums try to access entities to get information. I've given you the example of our computers. I gave the example of Steve Jobs, and he was in LSD state, got all these ideas. And I believe that actually Steve Jobs, even though he didn't know that they were giving them to him, that's where he was getting those ideas from. It wasn't some mystery that he was actually being he was actually being fed. A bit like we give our dogs and cats treats. So they decided that they were going to use him to give us a treat. The Draco are, just to explain, and I don't know how up. Are you up on the Draco? Do you know what the Draco is, Tim?
I know some things, but I'd rather hear you talk about it, because I'm not entirely certain that everything was accurate. From my perspective, they're an alien species. They do physically sometimes, even if they're like multi-dimensional. To me, they're so they're just as they would be, in theory, kind of like us. There would be good and bad ones. I don't think that they're just some demons. I've heard that said. Alternatively, I really absolutely dislike that. I do have seen information about that. And one friend was like, "Oh, you use the power of Jesus, quote unquote, to send them away." But I'm like, why? At any rate, at any rate, Draco to me is an alien species. So continue.
No, well, alien is actually Draco is a group. It's the group name, and there are different species group.
Okay.
It's the nickname because they originated allegedly from Alpha Draconis, the
Yes.
star system.
Yes.
So that's where it came from. And in fact, we have the word draconian, which is ironic. Did that come from that star system as well? Isn't that weird? And of course, we know what rule givers, and they're very much certainly the reptilians are very much into order and creating rules.
Okay.
I remember we talked earlier about that, about where these laws come from. Are they representative of us? And of course not, because they're simply control measures. So they're all about controlling the flock of sheep. Um, I'll just give you a very brief background to the Draco. There is a hierarchy. It starts up. It's right at the top is the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki are rogue time lords. We'll need another show to even delve into that. You're just going to have to take my word for it. These are not physical beings. They talk about Anunnaki coming down and Sitchin, all bullshit. Not bullshit. It's a misunderstanding. Sitchin's misinterpretation. No, not even misinformation. Although he was very much in with the Israelite old guard, with their archaeological old guard, so it wouldn't surprise me at all. But it's a misinterpretation. Now, so the Anunnaki then created manifest beings which are unique. They can't reproduce, so they are one-offs, and their group name is Baal. So people call that in the Bible Baal, it's actually Baal. That is the group name. The Baal created much lower vibrational entities. Now, I'm not sure whether Lucifer was lower than them or higher than the bridges between Baal and the dragons, or between Baal and the Anunnaki. I suspect it's actually between the dragons. So I think that there was a step down to Lucifer, and Lucifer was I suppose, just another archangel. So there were various archangels, and Lucifer was one of them. And then the next level down were the dragons, and the dragons are geneticists, and the dragons created they created one version of man out of pterodactyl DNA. And the pterodactyl is the closest you're going to get, I think, to dragons in manifest form. So if you want to find dragons on the earth, you look at pterodactyl skeletons. That's what they are. So those are the old dragons. So the pterodactyl DNA became used to make these creatures called the pteroids, Pteroids. And that was around about 50 million years ago, thereabouts. And after that, along came the Seacars, a relatively modern genetic production, and that happened somewhere between 3 and 5 million years ago. And they were created out of tyrannosaur DNA.
Okay.
In homage to Tyrannosaurus Rex. Now, for those with their third eye opened, that have got it activated right, I can actually see them, and they look like what I imagine would have been, miniature versions of Tyrannosaurus Rex. Literally they look sort of humanoid, but their heads are remarkably like what I would imagine Tyrannosaurus Rex to be like.
Okay.
And I can actually see them. Some of these images are moving, some of them are not. They can do some very weird things. Very weird. For instance, they can transmit emotions. So they can transmit an emotion to make you feel sad or happy or angry, and it's not your emotion.
So is that kind of the opposite of saying empathy? So, we can feel empathy.
Yes.
Personally, I can feel a lot of emotion off of other people, which really throws me off when I'm at work and I'm around an angry coworker. It really bothers me a lot, and I have to try very hard to turn that down. And I don't have full control over it, but I can very empathetic as a person.
But you still have ultimate roots control. What you can't have empathy transferred on you. And this is what they can do. They can actually zap you with a gun, not with a gun, but with their minds, and actually make you afraid simply their they can induce this emotional state if they wish. Now those sort of intuitively enough can work out whether the emotion is rogue or real. So, but I'm just giving you one of the techniques that they can do. So these Ciakars, Ciakars, were the reptilian version of man, and they were 3 to 5 million years ago. Now, obviously they've been around for a very long time, and people have got to get the book to understand that our scientific understanding of evolution is wrong.
Yes.
In fact, what we do is we have DNA upgrades, and those DNA upgrades are actually administered by our sun.
Okay.
Which isn't real. Which isn't real.
Yes. 1 second before we get any further, I just wanted to say we have about 7 minutes left before the end of the show and the music comes on.
Oh.
So if you want to cover the sun a little bit, and we'll maybe next time we have you on, we'll get into more.
Yes.
About 7 minutes or so to the end of the show, and I want before you get done, we want to kind of plug our stuff and kind of do a recap a little bit maybe. But go into the sun for like 2 minutes or something like that really quick, because I did really enjoy that, and I thought it was very interesting that what you had to say.
Well, we haven't really finished the Draco, but we can come back on that another time. Although, could we perhaps? All right. No, can I just finish the Draco? I'll do you a couple of minutes, because you wanted to do about these blood sacrifices. I'll cut a long story short. So essentially, we are. So we have Ciakars. The Ciakars created us. So human beings are essentially, we are Ciakars. We're our limbic system. We've got reptilian. We've got a reptilian pulmonary system, which is a fused cold and warm-blooded system. And if they ever got a Neanderthal, they would find it's got a different pulmonary system to us. It's different, and that's why I don't believe they're ever going to find one. Okay. And that's why they've been phased out. And you can find that information in the Bible, of all places. If you look at Genesis, Adam was Neanderthal. Eve wasn't a woman, it was us, it was human, and the reptile comes in. The snake is representative of their geneticists, the Ciakar geneticists. So you've got to read that very carefully. Anyway, that's that done. So
Michael
they have
has actually done a lot on the book of Genesis and what that actually means. And there's been a lot of people, including Michael Sarian, saying that yes, the Adam and the Eve were different races, and they had different abilities and such.
Yeah, correct. He's spot on. So, in terms of there's been a lot of talk about the Draco rituals. They've got a range of entities from very, very highly spiritual down to the low vibrational guys, the worry. They're relatively close to our dimension, but not close enough to manifest. So people must understand that as time goes forward, we're going to evolve, and there's going to be changes, because we're going to change. Eventually, we're going to have an atomic shift, and we'll have to talk about that in a future show, but that's what the Ascension's all about. But at the moment, the Thor movement and the Vril societies and the Pentagon are trying to use mediums to tap into this knowledge base of these entities, and they're doing it in some ways successfully. In other ways, they're just being manipulated by the entities themselves. But those guys, they have a whole different outlook on the meaning of life, I suppose you'll call it, and it's very much about ownership and respect, etc., etc. So, and control is in the blood. So if they have control of the blood, they own you. But it's got to be a two-way mutual thing. There's a respect thing here. So I'd take another show to do that justice. Okay. But I can say that to answer the original thing about the chakras of the world and blood, I think that's largely correct.
Okay.
But not necessarily it's negative for us, but not in a cosmic sense. When we have a greater understanding of purpose, in the cosmic sense, we're going to have a much better understanding why this happens. I'm not condoning, I'm just saying that there's more to it than meets the eye.
Yeah, well, I've been trying to say for a while now that as humans, or I should say that the Earth itself is like the gold mine for spiritual experience. When you live lives on Earth, like because of living in a physical body and such, we learn an awful lot. Because technically, if you're in the astral planes, you don't really feel pain, you don't really feel hunger, you don't know what that means, you don't really have a sense of responsibility. So I think that
Yes.
the Earth is like a gold mine for experience because it's such a screwed up world, if you want to, for lack of a better term. We literally hit the gold mine for living here. Even if it is painful and horrible at times, we are learning an awful lot. We might not even be aware of all that is. So we're going to end up running out of time here. You can
I thought we would.
and everything on revisingreality.com. I have a Facebook page and everything. You can find all that kind of information. I will have a YouTube video of this show up eventually. In the meantime, please, support the station. I want to do another plug. I don't want to be unjust to having showtime here because I really, really enjoy it. And Crystal is here. She has a Facebook profile. All that stuff's linked as well. And Steve's is as well. Steve, plug your book one more time and your websites really quick.
Yeah, so go to oddithinker.wordpress.com. That's with the Z's or Z.
Mm-hmm.
And exopolitician.wordpress.com. If you go into the About sections, there are details on how you can purchase the book. Various options there. So love you to get your support, but also love to pass that information out to you.
Absolutely. I do want to mention this. If you wanted to, we could do like a part 3 of this show, even if we don't do it right away, because I know you're a busy man. We should do a part 3 of this and get even more into all of the subjects discussed, and then do a couple of shows perhaps eventually in the future where I just have you on. Crystal and I have you on, and we chat about all kinds of interesting things and get deeper into all kinds of different subjects. I mean, there's so much that can be touched, and I do a lot of research on it as well, so I have a lot to bring to the table, and so do you, and so does Crystal. And I have, my Trinity comes on every now and again as well, and she has a lot of stuff. So there's so much that we can end up covering in the future, and it would be very, very fun to be able to do that at some point, and we'll end up talking about that. That would be very awesome. And I'm not entirely sure when we run out of time. It's probably about 2 minutes from now. Is there anything you want to mention at the very end?
Well, really, I'm very much looking forward to coming back. I think we've made a lot of ground here. I think a few people have gone away with more questions than answers, and so keep those questions coming in to Tim through the website, and let's see if we can answer them for next show.
Absolutely, that'd be awesome. I love to get that kind of stuff. I didn't really get a chance to do a lot of that before because I'm a new host and whatever, still learning the ropes, and I don't get a chance to watch the chat room. It's very nice to have Crystal, and my friend Noreen also likes to watch things. But here we go. We're out of time. Thank you very much. Please support the station. Check out Steve's work. Check out revisingreality.com. And I'll see you all next week at the same time. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful evening.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. isn't working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it. Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio!
Enjoy your
Extra big-ass fries.
You didn't give me no fries. I got an empty box.
Would you like another?
Extra big-ass fries.
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please
What?
come back when you can afford to
Oh,
make
no,
a purchase.
no.
I'm sorry you're having
Come
trouble.
on. My
I'm
kids
sorry
are
you're having trouble.
starving.